Hi guys and welcome to Studio Wildlife. I've been a little bit under the weather lately, so I haven't really had time to do any painting or anything new, so I thought now I'm feeling a bit better I would do another one of these real-time videos for you guys exclusively on Patreon, just as a way to thank you for your support, and just another video there just to try and sort of do something new, something a bit different, because I've been a bit slow on the Patreon over the last month because of being ill and because of my exhibition that went really well. So, sorry for all the sniffles and all of the coughing, I really do apologise. I will try and rein it in as best I can, but let's make a start. So I'll show you my palette first. Got black, raw umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, cadmium orange hue, cadmium red, cobalt blue, a green, and a white. So it's pretty much my original palette, just with a few added colours, and what I'm going to paint today is a grizzly bear, and I got this photo from Unsplash. So if you find it on Unsplash as well, you are also welcome to use it and to copy the painting, or at least try and do your own painting. I wouldn't recommend copying mine exactly, but try and make the painting your own. So I'm just going to find a flat brush. I am not very prepared, I have not got my brushes out. So I'm just going to find a flat brush to start with. Found one. So I'm just starting with this number 14 flat brush from Royal and Langnickel. Just going to dip it in some water, and I'm just going to start by blocking in my bear with just a little bit of raw umber paint. Just one flat colour, just a little bit of a wash, just so that I can establish the shape of that bear in my mind and on the canvas. That's a bit too watery, you can see where all the bubbles are forming, so I've not got enough paint or enough pigment there, so I'm just going to add a little bit more paint to my mix and then just scrub it into the canvas. This is a very textured small canvas, so it will need quite a bit of scrubbing for these first layers, just because it's so, I want to say hydrophobic, but that isn't the right word for this. It's just not taking the paint very well. I mean, maybe it is a little bit hydrophobic, that's why the water's peeling off. But it doesn't really matter for this first stage. I've already got a hair in it. I hate it when you get hairs in the paintings. I'll just peel that away. So just doing a rough sort of wash. Hopefully this will dry. Just getting the main shape of my bearing. I'm not planning on spending longer than, say, an hour and a half on this painting. It's just going to be a very quick, small painting sketch that you guys could do as well in short amounts of time. So I'm just blocking in this wash. You could also do the entire painting all in this brown raw umber colour and just give the entire painting a quick wash first, so you're not working on that white background. But for me, I like to separate my animal from the background right from the very start. So I like just doing these thin blockings and thin washes, separating the animal from the background. Okay, so there is my bear blocked in. What I'm going to do now is do a little bit of a wash for the background. I think I'm going to use a bigger brush for this. So I'm going to use just this soft filbert brush. And I am going to try and keep this background kind of out of focus a little bit, but I want it to look a little bit more solid than the bear. But to do that, I need to build up my layers one on top of the other. So the first layer is going to look a little bit washy, and then it's going to get darker and darker as you build layers over the top. So I'm just taking a little bit of the blue and mixing it with some of the raw umber again, just to create this sort of cold brown colour. Then I'm going to just do exactly the same thing. In fact, I'm going to add a little bit more blue and make it a little bit bluer, and a little bit of black just to grade off, desaturate it a little bit, and also darken it a little bit. And then I'm going to just start to wash this over the background again in exactly the same way as before. Just trying to get a nice clean edge between the bear and the background, but it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect because we're going to do more layers over the top later on. So I just gave it a quick hairdry just to dry the layers. This works with acrylic paints but not with oil paints. Do not use oil. Do not use a hairdryer on oil paints. It doesn't help them dry, and it can potentially release hazardous chemicals into the air, which you'll breathe in, and it can be quite toxic for you. So only use hairdryers with acrylics, watercolours, things like that, but not oils. So what I want is this kind of out of focus. I'm going to do the bokeh background because I quite like that bokeh effect I've been doing recently in my paintings. So again, I'm just going to build up these layers. I want this sort of like bluey colour, this bluey brown colour for the background. I'm going to try and use a little bit of thicker paint just in some areas, just trying to build up a solid base for this background. I've added just a touch of green to it, and now I'm also going to add a touch of red, just to try and get a little bit of these purpley colours just showing up in some places in this background. So getting a bit darker now, and then this bit is going to be sort of the tree line, and just because of the colour scheme that I'm using, and just because of the colour scheme of the photo, I'm going to try and add a little bit more saturated blue in there. Just in these little downward strokes, just trying to give the impression of a tree line. Doesn't have to be absolutely amazing. This is just a rough sketch, but just putting them in, just giving that little impression of some trees. Maybe I'll put another one here. Just nice and simple, nice and easy to do. Then what I might actually do is just take a little bit of black, mix it with that blue again, and just add a few darker areas between these trees just to establish those trees that little bit more. These areas don't have to be absolutely perfect, just here and there. Just like that. Then what I think I'm going to do is maybe add just a few more kind of like highlighty areas, just with the flat brush again. And all I'm going to do is take my blue colour, mix it with a tiny bit of red, just to give this a bit of a lilac-y tinge, and then a tiny little bit of white. The white is going to make the paint a little bit more opaque and also lighten it slightly. And what I'm going to do is just, in some places on these trees, just put a little bit of an edge. Doesn't have to be absolutely amazing, just slight little edge, just to give them a little bit more form and just establish those trees in the distance that little bit more. We're going to go a little bit lighter in a second, but this is alright for now. Okay, I think we can do the same thing now. We can go a little bit lighter with those highlights. So we're going to take more of the white, mix it with our blue mix, and maybe add just a tiniest little bit of orange, the complementary colour to blue. I think it's the complementary colour, I think that's what the opposites are. What that is going to do is neutralise the colour slightly and make it a little bit more grey, but still keep it as a cool grey. And all I'm going to do is just roughly along some of these trees, just put in this little highlight line, just randomly, just down this right hand edge of these trees. Put a few more just coming down in the background, just like that. Okay, I'm happy with how that's looking so far. Next, I just want to add some out of focus leaves. For the out of focus leaves, I'm going to take a little bit, sorry, this is where my voice is going. I'm going to take a little bit of burnt sienna, so that orangey brown, mix it with a little bit of the green to create a very sort of, I don't know, browny green colour. And we're going to start by just, with a sort of very frayed flat brush, I'm just dotting some leaves. Just these brown leaves, just in some areas on these trees. Keeping it quite loose, just dabbing it. Now you can move away from your reference photo for this and make it look a little bit more unique. Put the leaves where you want them, they don't have to be absolutely perfect. So we've started to build up some of these different coloured leaves. What I'm going to do now is take a little bit more green and we're going to start to add some greener areas just over the top of some of the colours that we've just done, and as their own standalone little sections. Just trying to give the impression of these leaves on the trees in the background. Okay, I think that is looking okay to me so far. And then what we want to do is take some more of our green and mix it with a little bit of the cadmium yellow just to brighten it up a little bit. And maybe a touch of white as well. And just add those few final little touches here and there, just where maybe some light would be catching some of the leaves. Okay, I think I'm going to add a little bit more green. These lighter colours just to make it pop a little bit more. Make it a little bit more obvious that we've got some foliage in the background. I really like the sort of like turquoisey blue combination with the green. I use it quite a lot in my paintings and in my pastel drawings especially. I just really like the colour combination. It gives it sort of like a mystical, magical feeling, and I use it subconsciously quite a lot in my work. It's not a conscious decision, but I just really like how greens and blues work together. They're probably one of my favourite colour combinations, so I do subconsciously use them quite a lot in my paintings. Okay. Okay, now we've brought out more of that green. I actually want a little bit of a lighter layer over the top. So I'm going to take a little bit of yellow ochre, mix it with my green, just to create a bit more of a yellowy green, and then add a touch more white to the mix. And then just in some places, I'm just going to add this new colour, just to bring back some of those highlighted sections again. Now, I'm not aiming for realism here with this background because it is just such a small painting, but you could quite easily create a realistic background by doing these techniques. You just need to take a little bit more care and match your reference photo a little bit more closely. There we go. Next, what I want to do is establish some form of like undergrowth. We've got our background right at the back, and then I want something set just in front of those trees, so like some bushes or some branches, things like that, and then I'm going to start to work on the foreground. So what I'm going to do is, what brush am I going to use? I'm just going to use the flat brush again. We've been using it so far, so I'm going to carry on with this frayed flat brush, and I'm going to pick a darker brown colour. So I'm going to take a little bit of burnt umber and mix it with a little bit of black, and I'm going to start to put in just a few darker sort of branches, some lines, some twists. Mixing the black with the burnt umber gives it an almost like a purpley brown, which is a really nice saturated brown that I really like. And it'll just really complement the colours of the blue. That coldness of that blue will also match with the coldness of this burnt umber and black mix. So I'm just randomly just splodging it on. Not being particularly neat with it, just whacking it on the canvas. Okay, then we can go a little bit lighter with it. So I'm going to use that same mix, the burnt umber with the black, but now I'm going to add a little bit of yellow ochre to it. And a touch of, I'm going to say a little bit of blue just to cool it down even more. So this is our next section, and I'm just doing the same thing, just putting some of this lighter colour in randomly just to add this variation, add a little bit more colour, add a few more hues to the picture, just giving it that little bit more interest rather than just using one solid flat colour. Let's now add a touch of white to this. I'm going for quite a desaturated looking section here. I don't want it to overpower the bear. I do want the bear to be the most saturated thing in the picture, so it stands out and pops. So I've just added a little bit of white to my mix and a little bit of yellow as well. And all I'm going to do is just add some little sort of branches, some little twigs here and there, just dotting around. And not being absolutely perfect, just these little marks, these abstract shapes, just forming in this background. Okay, and then in this background I also want to add a little bit of colour. So we're going to take some of the green again and just do exactly the same process that we did before. Just in some areas we are going to add some little tufts of green, just to indicate some foliage on these branches, or on these bushes, whatever they are. I've not really decided what they are. So just repeating that process, I'm going to take a little bit of the burnt sienna, just add some orange ones in, some of these little tufts, and then do the same thing with our lighter colours. So I'm going to take some of that green, mix it with a little bit of yellow ochre, pop some of that in, just like that. Then touch of white to that. Just in some areas. Just to really try and make them pop. Okay, then we've got our second layer of the background. Okay, now we're going to move on to the foreground, and more specifically the transition between this section and the foreground. This bit's going to be a bit flat, so I want it kind of hazy. So I'm going to take some of that grey mixture from before, just quite watered down. And I'm just going to do some sort of sideways, just these little washes, just to try and act as a transition between these two areas. Just like that. So we're going to add some darker areas now by using some raw umber and some black, just putting in some little patches. I'm going to move very much sideways with this, just to differentiate the foreground from the background. Some of these black patches in. Don't have to be absolutely perfect. Same on the bottom. Some of these darker areas, we can get a little bit more saturated towards the front of this picture. Then, what do we want? Want a little bit of the sort of like purpley brown. So we're going to take some of the burnt umber, mix it with a bit of blue. And then mix it with some white. And then again, just using that sideways motion, just putting in some of these little, essentially abstract shapes, really. Just putting them in, just in some areas. Again, doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. I'm just rushing this through. Just going to flip it up so I can actually see the bottom. I don't really like the lip on some of these easels for these smaller paintings. I'd rather have just a flat work surface, as in like get rid of this lip. I know it holds the canvas on, but it just covers a little bit of the canvas when I'm painting, and I have to do this, which I don't really like. The canvas just doesn't feel as supported when it's like this. And it moves back just like it's doing. Okay, now I'm going to add a little bit of green. So I want a bit of grass here. So let's start thinking about where we want some green to go. So I definitely want some green here. Just putting in some of these green colours, just working sideways instead of that dabbing motion. Now just trying to differentiate that foreground from the background using some brush strokes and techniques like that. Sorry, I'm just standing up because my back is hurting, so you might have heard my chair move. Just brushing in some of this greener colour. Looking a bit watercolory at the minute. Oops. So I'm going to take a little bit more green, a bit more solid paint now, and just try and dab that in some areas. Just trying to saturate it up a little bit in places. Just like that. Also going to add some yellow to that. Again, trying to keep the variation of the greens. We don't want to just use one solid colour of green. I think green is the colour with the most different shades of any colour out there. So you want to show that in your paintings. Have loads and loads of different types of greens. Add yellows to it, add blues to it, add browns to it, add whites, add blacks. Loads and loads of different variations in loads of different combinations. Really, really makes your greens stand out a little bit more, and it makes them pop just that little bit more and look a little bit more sort of true to life. Even if you're not painting them as a realistic painting, having those realistic colours, or like semi-realistic or true to nature colours in there, will make your painting pop. It'll just add that little bit more variation to it. Drawing the viewer in that little tiny bit more for longer, rather than just one solid flat colour of green. Okay, I want some orange in there now. So I've mixed my orange with a bit of green, so it's still quite a green, but it's got this hint of warmth coming through it now. Just a little bit more of that variation I was talking about. Let's take some more orange. Let's put some over here towards the bottom. Let's warm it up towards the bottom of it. So we've got some orange. Let's take a bit of burnt sienna, mix it with the orange. It's not quite orangey enough, the burnt sienna that I'm using. Put that in as well, that's better. Put some of that in. Put a little bit of this orange up here, just tie it in a little bit, same with over here. Okay, I'm happy with that for my base. We're going to work on that a little bit more later. We just wanted to get the base of the background done before, or the foreground, before I started working on the bear. We can actually probably do a touch of work back here, which I'm going to do with a small angled brush, just because it gives me a little bit more control. And all I'm going to do is just using a little bit of the orange mixed with a little bit of a light green and some white. Just going to start adding a few just little sort of tufts of grass here and there. I'm using the angle brush rather than a detail brush because I want it to look still quite soft. I don't want it to look too in focus. I'm just putting these little sort of blobs here and there, just to give the impression of some loose tufts of grass just in the background. Not too bothered about using this block colour here, I don't really mind. Do the same thing, maybe with a different colour, maybe with a greener colour. And just start to put in a few little tufts of grass here and there. Just to make it pop. Make it look like he's on a forest floor. That little bit more. I'm very much not going for realism with this picture. I'm just sort of making it up as I go along. It's just a sketch. This would be more of a colour study, or just a study or a composition study for a bigger painting. Just tilt it a little bit. And I'm going to just put a little bit of blue into the orange mix just to make it a little bit colder. And just put some of that just tied into the very background. A little bit of blue in there. Just going to tie in. To the background at the top. Okay. So we'll come back to the foreground later. What I'm going to start to do next is work on the bear itself. So I'm going to use my flat brush that I was using before, and what we're going to try and do is first establish the darks. So I'm going to take some of my black, mix it with a little bit of the burnt umber, and I'm just going to start to establish where I want the darkest colours. So like here on the back of the leg, as it goes under the belly, belly there, and then sort of drawing this front leg. This front leg is going to have lots of folds of fur, so I want to have that dark base layer down to build those strands of fur over the top. We've probably got this other front leg that's going to be in the darkness, or in the shadow, as most people would call it. Really trying to establish where those darker colours are going to be. So we're going to have lots of this fur, lots of folds of thick fur all over this bear. I'm making it really easy for myself as well, because I'm not actually going to paint the feet in. I'm just going to have them floating around in the grass. Okay, let's have a look. So this is going to be our back ear. Then our front ear is going to go somewhere like that. It's going to be tufted face, gonna have some neck fur here, just like that. We're gonna have some more folds of this darker fur in the neck, a couple of these in the back, just trying to establish a bit of form and a bit of shape. Definitely going to have some darker shapes in the face. Put a shadow on that face as well. Okay, next we're going to take a bit more brown. So I'm going to take some burnt umber. I'm going to predominantly be using burnt umber, I think, for the base of this bear. And now we want to start to block this area in. So some areas where it's going to get a little bit browner, a little bit more saturated, a bit less black. Just going to start to build this over the black fur that we've just put down. Some of that black fur might still be wet, which is okay, because that allows us to create some softer transitions between the two colours. So just establishing our darks really still. We are going to work over the top of these darks with some lighter colours in a moment. Okay, I'm happy with how that's looking so far. What we are going to move on to next is a little bit of detailing, or sort of like modelling. So I'm going to take my burnt umber again, small amount of burnt umber, and mix it with some yellow ochre. I want a bit more of a yellowier colour now, a bit more of a golden colour on my bear. I'm going to also mix it with a touch of black just to help desaturate it slightly, and also a touch of blue, again to desaturate it but also to cool it down a little bit so it's not as warm. And what we're going to start to do is try to establish some of the form of this bear. So like the brow, bit of the nose. Just trying to get a bit more information into the painting. Let's have, this will be this like chesty bit. ear. Let's get a bit more detail on that ear. Same for the other ear. Bit on his jaw. We're just trying to build up some sort of rough shapes. Just trying to put a bit of variation in. Still. And put a bit more depth into the picture. I want to try and make him look like soft and quite fluffy. So to do this, I'm not painting all the individual hairs. I'm just doing these big sort of like folds of fur in his body. Just trying to establish a little bit of that fluff. I think we are starting to get somewhere with it. Okay, next up, I'm actually going to add a little bit more black fur. Just using my small angled brush, maybe put a touch of blue in there to cool it down a little bit. I'm going to start to just add a few more little refined areas of this fur. Probably can't really see it as much here, but I'm just adding some of those darker strands just to make it look that little bit more fluffy. And especially down here where we're going to have a little bit more shadow. Just re-establishing those darker areas. Again, these folds of fur near the face and near the eye and the mouth and the nose as well. Okay, we're going to go a little bit lighter now, and I want a sort of yellowy blue colour. So I'm going to take some yellow ochre and mix it with a little bit of raw umber. And then I'm going to take some blue and maybe a touch of burnt sienna as well. Maybe a touch of cadmium yellow just to yellow it off a bit. And then a fair bit of white. And I'm going to start to try and put in a little bit of the impression of fur in some places. Just using the angled brush. Especially going to need this around the back, trying to show all this form and all these lumps and bumps of all the muscle in the back. just trying to roughly block it in. Same thing for around the body as well. More of this loose fur. Don't worry if it all looks too similar. We're going to do some more glazing over the top towards the end, which should make it all stand out and pop a little bit more. We'll do it for the top of the head as well. And then on those ears, trying to establish that ear a little bit more now. And the top of the head as well. Okay. What I'm going to do next is try and take a bit more of a saturated colour. So I'm going to take a little bit of orange. And just on some areas where I know there's going to be some light, I just want to put a bit of this saturated colour just starting to show through. Just like that. Maybe we'll also put a little bit near the top in some areas as well. So just around here, and around here. Okay. Next I'm going to get a bit of a smaller brush. I think I'm going to get this just small detail brush and just use it to just add a few more little areas of this fur. Just on some parts of the bear. Not being too specific with it, just sort of playing around with it, having a little bit of fun with it. Probably should be looking at my reference photo a little bit more closely. It's probably not going to look like a bear by the end of this, but who cares? I'm having fun. Okay, now I want a slightly lighter colour, so I'm going to take a little bit more white and add it to my mix. And I'm going to start picking out some of the lighter areas of this fur. Now with my detail brush. Just like this, just picking out some of that lighter fur, just the general direction of it. trying to put it in the places where I see this lighter coloured fur. This area is still going to be in shadow, so I'm not going super bright with it. Even though it looks quite bright, I'm going to add some white later on, and you'll see that this is actually still a shadowy colour. Or at least that's what I hope it'll look like. Okay. Starting to get somewhere. What I want to add now is a little bit more of the orange, just in some places. So like down here, I want a little bit of an orange glow. I'm going to want a little bit more orange over here as well, and maybe a little bit where the ear is going to go. Let's put some more orange on this front leg as well. Let's put some on the back leg as well, just as a little... I think the orange will really complement the blue of the background as well. Okay, let's now try and sculpt a bit more of this face. So I want to take a little bit of purple. So I'm taking a little bit of blue, mixing it with a little bit of red. And then I'm going to take a little bit of burnt umber just to brown it off a little bit. And then just water it down, because I just want to be doing glazes of this rather than actual solid colour. And what we're going to try and do is find a good position for the eye. Now bear eyes are quite small, so I think that's quite okay. I think. Is that okay? Does that look stupid? I think it'll be okay. I'm also going to establish a little bit more of the nose shape. Just very simply like that. We're not doing anything super realistic here, so it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. Just has to kind of like resemble a bear. Hey, I'm going to do something now that I don't usually recommend, but I'm going to do it anyway. In fact, what I'm going to do first is just lighten up this area here. So just adding a touch of yellow to it. And then I'm going to do something that I don't usually recommend. So I'm now going to add pure white. Because this is just a sketch and I really want it to pop, I'm going to add some pure white to my drawing or to my painting. I wouldn't usually recommend using pure white just because you can't go any brighter. Once you've used your pure white in your painting, that's it. There's nowhere else to take it. But for this, just because it's a little sketch, I don't really mind using the pure white. So what I'm going to do is just start to put this like tuft of backlighting all the way around the bear. Don't have to be absolutely exact with it. hopefully what you should see is the bear form and structure really start to emerge. Or I've just completely cocked it up and it's going to look completely rubbish. Which I am feeling it's heading that way, if I'm being totally honest. I think I'm going to have to do a lot of work on the face to get it to look right. And the ear now. Bit of the head. The other ear. Let's try and get that shape in. And then I've got to try and establish the shape and form of the head now. So I've got to really think about where the edge of that head is going to fall and where the brow is going to fall. Let's have a look what we can do. So grizzly bears have this like big solid forehead. I think it's a grizzly bear, it might be a brown bear. Bears have these like big solid brows and big solid foreheads. So that's what I've tried to establish there. I don't actually think that is big enough. I want it to look really sort of like round and bulbous. And I've just not got it with that, but it's a sketch, so it doesn't really matter. Then the nose. I want this sort of like arched nose shape. We'll come back to and reform in a second. Then around the mouth a little bit, we'll have these little tufts. Got the mouth, and we've got a little bit of a tuft on the chin, and then we've got some fur underneath the jaw and the chest, just like that, and then some more on this front leg as well. Like that, and then we're also going to have just here some more light hitting the brow of the bear, like that. And because of that, I think I really need to move my eye of that bear. So what I'm going to do is just knock back a little bit of this white. Don't need it all white. A bit more like that. Then we're going to add a few little highlights here and there. A few more little just tufts of fur. We are going to push the eye forwards a little bit, just like that, and add a little bit more of the yellow fur there. Then what I'm going to do is just take some pure black, and we're going to try and put a little bit more of the nose in, and a little bit more of the mouth in. Then our mouth is going to go to like there. Then our eye is going to actually be probably more like there on our bear. Yeah, I'm liking that better already. Just going to take a little bit of the burnt umber, just get rid of some of putting in a few little darker sections. Then I'm going to take some of my blue, a little bit of my burnt umber, and some whites. And I'm just going to create some little highlights for my nose. And a little bit around my eye as well. So I want to give it a little brow, some area under the eye. Just want to darken that bottom bit off. Oh, too much water. I want to get rid of that, but I want to darken that bottom section off just a little bit. Just put too much paint on, just like that. And then we can always add a tiny bit of brown to the eye, along with a tiny dot, if we can get it this small, tiny little dot of white, and a tiny couple of little dots on the nose. Might be a bit too much white on that, so what we're going to do, take some black, try and knock it back a little bit with a pupil. There we go. Let's see how that looks so far. Yeah, it looks a little bit more bear-like. What we are going to do now is hopefully going to change this even more. So I want a little bit more yellow going on the top. So what we're going to do is take some yellow ochre and just water it down quite a lot. And what I'm going to do is just glaze some yellow just over the top of this white and some of the areas near the top of the bear, as well as down in these corners and some on the top of the head. Glaze, bit of yellow, bit more yellow there, bit of yellow there, bit of yellow there. Do the same thing. Gonna get a little bit of orange as well. Bit of orange in places. And then I'm also going to do it with a little bit of bluey black, but I'm going to use a bigger brush for this. I'm going to use a flat brush. And I'm going to take some black, and I'm going to mix it with some blue. I'm also going to mix it with a bit of burnt umber as well. And just going to use that as a glaze over some of the darker areas. Just putting a bit of blue in it, making it a little bit colder. Especially down here near the belly. It was all looking a bit similar. We can then even use that small angled brush with some black and just really try and pick out a few more little areas of real jet black fur. Just like that. Let's have a look at how that looks in the camera. Not amazing, but it'll do for now, for a little sketch that it is. We could even potentially add a few more little highlights just to round off that back. So we could take some yellow ochre, mix it with a little bit of the white. And what we could do is just try and put a little bit more form into some of these lighter areas. Try and put a little bit more fluff back into it. Just like that, kind of. If we want to, we can also add a few more little bits of white here and there, just to try and... too much water, just rub it off with your fingers. A few little bits of white here and there, just to bring it back if you've lost it. Okay, for the forest floor, what I then like to do, we can do it with the same brush, or you could do it with a liner brush. I'm going to do it with a liner brush just because it takes more paint. I'm going to start to put in a few just little sort of lines of darker colour. So I'm going to take a little bit of black and some dark green, or make some dark green, some black with some green. And I'm just going to start adding a few just little flicks of grass, just here and there, not everywhere, just like some little dots, just giving the impression of these tufts on the forest floor. Just being pretty much completely random with it. Then I can do exactly the same thing with maybe a lighter colour. So let's take some yellow ochre. Now I'm going to do exactly the same thing, just some random little marks, just here and there, just knocking around, just giving the impression of things on that floor. Do the same thing with a bit of orange. Just putting a bit of variation into that foliage. Okay, then we can start thinking about some of the lighter blades of grass. So now we want a bit of green. And we want to take a little bit of green, and I don't really like the green that I'm using, so I'm going to add a little bit of yellow ochre to it just to sort of saturate it up a little bit, make it a bit more yellow. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of white to it as well. And I'm just trying to mix up a nice lightish green colour. So I'm going to start with quite a desaturated one and then work up the saturation. So now I'm just trying to put some little flicks of green in the area that I've just been working in. Just making these a little bit more like grass rather than just random marks. They're a bit longer, a bit more directional, but again, I'm not being super picky with it because it is just a sketch. I'm just trying to give the impression of the grass. Okay, now we can get a lighter colour. And we can start putting in some lighter blades of grass. Now maybe even a bit of yellow and a bit of green. Make some slightly yellower ones and a bit more white. Start to add some even lighter bits into the grass. This is pretty much the same technique I would use if I was painting realistic grass. I would just take a lot more care and be a little bit less abstract with the marks that I'm making. Because this is just a sketch and the canvas is not really good for detailed work, I've not really been too bothered about the details for this one. Just going to adjust that bear's nose slightly. Just going to take a little bit of raw umber and I just want to add just a touch of, I just want to change where that highlight is ever so slightly. I just want to thin it off a little bit here. I don't know if that's made a difference, but well. So now I'm going to just take this smaller detail brush and I want to go even lighter with the grass, just because of how light my bear is. It just looks a little bit sort of stuck on my bear. So I want to start to add just a few little bits of this, like lighter, just little speckles or little bits of grass just within this forest floor. Let's try and bring the foreground out past the bear. Make it pop a little bit more, just so that we know that it's definitely in front of the bear. We could even add some of these little bits, just sort of dotting up, almost like little bits of pollen, just floating around in the air. Like that. I don't think I'm quite finished with it yet. I like the look of it, but I just want to make it look a little bit more sort of mystical, a little bit more magical. So what I'm going to do is just try and add this like little bit of a fog rolling in behind the bear. So this might work, it might not. And I want it to be a little bit of a bluey fog. So I'm just going to take some white and mix it with a little bit of blue and a touch of that burnt sienna again. And I want just a very light colour. And all I'm going to do with very, very watered down paint is try and create this like mist. Just rolling in the background. I might have to use a different brush. I'm going to use this round brush just to blend it back. I'll just create this sort of like nice misty effect. In the background. Same thing on the other side. And then maybe a little bit in the foreground as well, just sort of like rolling over his feet. This like early morning kind of like mist rolling in. Yeah, I think that looks miles better, a lot more magical. And then just to finish it off, just because I really like this effect, I'm going to take some of the paint and my little toothbrush. And I'm just going to do a little bit of a flicker of some paint, some blue, and then I'm going to take some yellow ochre and some cadmium yellow as well. Just almost like some little fireflies. Just do a couple of little flicks of this colour on there as well. And then I'm going to call it done. The final thing that's needed is just a signature. That's what I might do, is just, I'm not too keen on the eye still. So I'm just going to take a little bit more black paint. And maybe that white was a little bit too bright and too intense. So I'm just going to make it a bit more of a purpley blue rather than a white for that highlight. Yes, I think that's much better. I'm just going to refine under the nose. And then I think the final thing, just sign it in the bottom. I'm just going to sign it in a dark green, just so it almost looks like part of the grass. I don't want my signature to stand out too much, but I want it to be visible slightly. So I'm just going to go just down in this bottom corner. So it is there, but it's just barely visible. And that's pretty much it, really. I will have this piece available for sale on my website, so if you would like to own this piece, please just let me know or purchase it through the website. And I hope you found the video useful. I hope you enjoyed watching it. And I just again want to say thank you for all your support and your continued support. Follow me on Patreon and the YouTube channels and the Instagram. The next video I'm going to put up is the deer video. I do want to make that a little bit more of a longer tutorial, or at least not a longer tutorial, but a bit of a better edited tutorial. So bear with me while I make that, but you might have seen that on my Instagram page already. I am going to do a almost real-time tutorial for that as well, so you'll be able to see that in the next couple of weeks. Anyway, that's it for me. I need to rest my voice because it's getting really sore. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.